So essentially, he said the following: it is very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. It is like a great team in sport that has a fantastic defense, but it is not allowed to play offense. There's no chance of winning! Exclamation point. It is like with Ukraine and Russia, crooked and grossly blah 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 would never let Ukraine fight back, only defend. How did that work out? Regardless, there is a war that would never happen. Zero chance. Anyway, we've heard that one before, but now he's basically saying there's no chance of winning, right? It is impossible to win a war without attacking an invader's country. Basically, everyone is up in arms now, basically saying that, oh my God, he wants Ukraine to attack Russia. Well, isn't that what they've been doing all along? Right? That's what they've been doing. They've been attacking and attacking. But it would appear that there was a change in the stance from the president. But is it truly? Is it truly what's happening? Okay. I have been telling you, and I'm going to make 10 points here, that Russia essentially is saying, that's because Russia is basically saying no to any troops on the ground in Ukraine. Trump's just want to fly over. Let's just fly over Russia, let's just fly over Ukraine, and that will give you the guarantees. Ukraine wants security guarantees. They don't want planes. You're seeing a hardened stance from Trump. But is this really a surprise? Basically, which I told you originally, Trump at some point is going to say, you guys are on your own. And that's kind of what he's saying now. You know, you do just bomb them more. Next is going to be, I'm out of here. Number 7, no way to keep peace price, to keep the Nobel Peace Prize without Ukraine peace. Right? So I think he's giving away. Number 8, which is what I've been saying all along, is that Putin did not like him getting that close to the European. When he went to Alaska and when they met, Trump wants one thing and Putin wants another thing. What Trump wants, fairly simple, he wants to keep Russia away from China. Because the longer Russia fights this war against Ukraine, the weaker it is going to get. And he doesn't like that idea. Okay. Does not like that idea at all. So what does it want? Well, he wants them to fight. He wants them to go in and fight. Number 8, Putin did not like him getting close to European. And what does he do right after this meeting? He invites all the European over in Washington, and it's a way of telling Trump, no, you're not getting it. I don't want them involved at all. And basically, Putin says, I don't want any U.S. troops. I don't want European troops between me and Ukraine. That's not going to happen. I don't want that. So Trump needs to give up his prize to keep Russia closer. He has to decide. And telling Ukraine to strike Russia means I'm out of this game. You need to understand the impetus. You know what's driving these people. Okay? It's fairly simple at the end of the day. Once Putin wants him out, doesn't want him close to the European, and 2, Trump wants him away from China. And he wanted the peace prize at the same time, but that cannot be done. That cannot be done. And Russia right now is in a war economy. So they're not going to give that up like that. There's no way they're going to give it up. Okay? They're going to keep fighting. So essentially, on August 21st, today, President Trump posted on Truth Social that Ukraine must go on the offensive to win the war. comparing it to a sports team. But he's not allowed to play offense. There is no chance of winning. Go ahead and do your thing. He specifically referenced Ukraine strikes on Ukraine infrastructure, including drone attacks on refinery and past operation like Operation Spiderweb. Trump also blamed, the other president, obviously, like he's done. So basically, this framing of offensive action as necessary and advising against defensive limitation. Get in there and do your thing. Protect yourself, right? Which at the end of the day, that Ukraine has no chance of winning the war without launching attacks inside Russian territory. Now, of course, how they're going to do that without the proper weapons, that's going to be a bit difficult. But at the end of the day, Russia rejection of the European, basically this comes to the fact that Russia is rejecting European military support. Russia has flatly ruled out any European troops or foreign military presence in Ukraine, complicating Trump's push for peace talk and making Ukraine defensive capability even more critical. So it looks like it's an evolving U.S. policy towards Ukraine. There are signals that Trump may be shifting toward a more active military posture, hinting at possibly increased support for Ukraine. I don't think so. Though the administration hasn't officially authorized escalated offensive weapon funding. That is not going to happen. That's not true. The U.S. cannot go and increase, hinting at possible increased support for Ukraine. That's not what he's saying. He's just frustrated. And the reason I know he can't do that is very simple. The MAGA people are never going to allow the U.S. to get involved. That is not going to happen. I mean, yes, Truth Social, fine. Say whatever you want. Say that I'm upset because essentially what has happened is Trump came in and he basically posted that, you know what, you do it. Because obviously Russia does not want the European in Ukraine, but that is not a big surprise, right? Because he knows very well that if you have soldiers in the middle, right, and including U.S. or non-U.S., and even if you're flying over, that is a problem. That is a problem for you, for Russia, because they need to decide what to do. So I'm going to make 10 points that are very important for you to guess, okay? Because after what Trump said today, which is, I'm just going to quote you literally what he says. He says, basically, it is very hard, if it's not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. So he wants Ukraine to attack the country, to attack Russia, not fight with Russia in Ukraine, to attack the invader's country. Make them hurt where it hurts the most, meaning in their country. Now, that de facto also means that, well, how am I going to do that? I got to reach all the way from Kiev, all the way. I need the weapons for that. Well, then everybody's saying, well, that's what he's going to do. He's going to, no. None of this is going to happen. For the simple reason is that the MAGA people will not allow that kind of involvement, further involvement. So Russia essentially is saying no to any troops on the ground in Ukraine. Great. Shouldn't be too surprised about that, because after all, if you know the history, you should know that actually Russia, went into Ukraine because NATO is getting closer and closer. And it's not for them to have a bunch of, French and English soldiers at the border, even if it's to keep the peace. Two, Trump was saying, well, let's just fly over. How about some planes? Yeah, I know, I'm not going to, but how about some planes? He said, no, that. And Ukraine obviously wants security guarantee and no planes. So what do you want? They want security guarantees because in 1994 they had quote-unquote guarantee that was understood by Ukraine, but at the end of the day they didn't get anything. It didn't work. Why? Because everybody had a different understanding. Even Russia, who signed the 1994 agreement, said, "Well, I signed the agreement with the previous administration in Ukraine, not in yours. So I'm attacking you." And the rest of the countries basically said, "Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, when we say guarantee, we didn't mean guaranteed for me to fight Ukraine. Guaranteed that we're going to complain a lot. We're going to give sanctions." That's exactly what happened. So point number 3 out of 10 is Ukraine wants security guarantee. That's not going to happen the way they want it. Number 4, You see a hardening stance from Trump, but the hardening stance that you're seeing from him is basically him starting to say, which I believe I mentioned it in my live a couple of days ago, that he's saying, you're on your own because I can't do it. I mean, all I could do is do some mean tweets, but I can't give you the weapons, and I can't help you more because the more I help you, the more I'm losing the MAGA, and this is not good. Basically, he's saying you are going to be on your own pretty soon, or just bomb them, do something. Number 6 is going to be, you know what, I'm out of here. I can't deal with this. Number 7, there's no way to keep. I think he's starting to realize this, he's not going to get that peace prize without Ukraine. So, but more important, okay, Putin, when they went to Alaska together, right? The idea for Putin was to keep him away from the Europeans, and the idea for Trump was to keep him away from China. But how are we going to keep? Then what do you do on Monday morning? You invite them all to the White House, right? The Nobel Peace Prize. That's not happening. That is not happening because that war is not ending now. And it's not ending now. First of all, you need to understand that Russia right now is in a war economy. What you have to worry about, in the U.S., you have to worry that you don't get entangled in some long war, because Russia is a war economy, and you just don't simply, switch it off and go back do something else. That is not going to happen like that. It is very difficult to stop this juggernaut. And if it's going to stop, it's going to get something. It's going to get everything that it wants. It wants the 20% that it already owns, and then it's going to want more. And if it can't get that, then it's going to keep on going and going and going, because there is no way around it. Unless the U.S. gets directly involved, give them some, a bunch of missiles that will reach out and hit Russia, inside Russia, because that's basically what he's asking. It is very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. He's telling Ukraine, go and everybody's up in arms. I mean, the news is full of that now, suddenly. Like, oh my God, that means that we're going to attack. No, you have to be careful when you listen to the news, because obviously they want to be very, they want to, things like Trump says Ukraine has no chance of winning the war without striking Russia. And of course, the White House, the MAGA people say, well, hold on, it's just an observation. He never said that. Don't put word in his mouth, although, pretty obvious. But you could see when it says the White House described the president as an observation, it doesn't mean what he says. And it also says to the MAGA people, guys, we're not getting involved in that level with these people, right? We wanted him to have his Nobel Peace Prize, so we let him go and talk and meet and think, but not that. That is not what we're thinking of doing, okay? And obviously, everyone, is up in arms because. All the newspapers are coming out. So look, we're gonna get involved in the U.S. We're gonna attack. There's gonna be a war. Blah blah blah. No, there's not gonna be a war, for the simple reason is one. The U.S. cannot get any more involved with the Ukraine. I mean, Trump could do lots of things. He could talk to lots of people, send lots of tweets, but the idea of having the U.S. sends that kind of weapon, or getting more involved, or offering security guarantees, it's just not possible. And it's not possible because the MAGA people will not allow the U.S. to, like they say, it's make America great again. Didn't say put America in another war. They don't want that. Now, if JD wants to get elected, if Marco Rubio wants to get elected at some point, right, it's not going to happen. And Putin, what he wants, and he almost got, he wants him away from the European. And he got that. They were together. There were no Europeans at the table, and Zelensky, which he really, frankly, disregarded as a clown at the end of the day. Okay. He said, "Well, I got 6 wars in 6 months, right? So that's deserving of something." He says, "No, no, no, that's not going to be enough. You want the big prize." Now, what I want to know, and I'm going to research that, who's dangling this thing over him, giving him the idea that, yeah, well, if you get the Ukraine deal done, I wouldn't be surprised, because don't forget who gives out the Nobel Peace Prize, right? The Nobel Peace Prize is given out by Finland, and Trump, right? Um, Norway. I'm sorry. Um, so he called Norway, because the country that gives away that prize is Norway. From and by the way, I don't know if we know who Nobel is, but he was the inventor of the dynamite. By the way, side order. Anyway, so he called Norway, and he called the a couple of months ago, and he said he wanted to discuss the tariffs, but then he also wanted to know what his chances were to win the Nobel Peace Prize. So right away, they call the European and they say, "Hey, he wants the Nobel Peace Prize." Well, hold on, don't. And because he's got six, the six peace treaty, right? Six in 6 months. You've done that. Some countries in Africa, in Uzbekistan, and a bunch of other countries. And you say, "Well, you got six of them." Yeah, but he needs seven, really. So I am very sure that they call someone in Europe, from Norway, saying, "Listen, he wants the last piece. What if he wants the last piece? Then he needs to stop the war. And for him to stop the war, he needs to offer those guarantees." And we mean guarantees, meaning we want some soldiers, we want some U.S. involvement, because if this thing goes sideways, there's no way we are going to fight the Russians. The Europeans don't have that kind of an army. And the Russians have been bad already. For the past 3 years, they've been, you make fun of the Russians, but they've been fighting for 3 years, and they got 20% of the country. They say, "Well, they didn't go all the way to Kiev." Well, you do 20% in 3 years, and we'll see. Don't look at the rhetoric. Look what's happening on the ground. So automatically, now, since they're dangling this thing, they want him to get to the last piece. And the last piece is, you need to get really involved. Okay, then let's bring all these people to Washington. Big mistake, because the moment he did that, Putin says, "Whoa, no, no, that's not what I meant. I didn't want you to get back with these people in Washington. I'm not going to do it." And then they agree, they talk, and he says, "No, no, 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 we're not going to have any European soldiers on the ground in front of me. I don't want NATO. Didn't you get that? I don't want NATO at all around. I want to do what I want to do. I'm ready to go. And frankly, even if you try to stop me, I will stop it." Okay. Um, so mention my name before answering my question. Would appreciate that. Sure. Trump would go for peace first, but Putin's not going to agree. That is correct, H47. That is correct. Putin is not going to agree because he wants to keep him away from the European. And he's not able to keep him away from the European because Trump decided, therefore, to invite them all over. Now, what was that idea about? The idea is to say, well, okay, so let's talk. And don't forget, number 7, Peace Prize. Yes, I will try to do a flyover or anything like that, right? So, and they weren't saying, "No, no, no, that's not what we mean. We really mean you to get involved," but they didn't say no to him. So he kept on going until, Lavrov said, "No, no, no one. We do want a peace. We take 20 or 25%. We have a peace treaty, and we wait, right? And we take what we have." And that automatically means that at some point, when I'm ready to start again, because don't forget, you've got this huge juggernaut, right, of an army and juggernaut of a process. Don't forget, the Russia is currently a war economy. Even the NATO Secretary General himself noted that Russia produces as much ammunition in 3 months that NATO does an entire year. So they're not going to somehow just forget about it and just pull back. That is not going to happen. That's going to take a while, and they are not going to push back just like that. That cannot be. So therefore, my point being is that and don't forget, okay, the European weapons have, in terms of missiles, have emerging capacity through U.S. procurement frameworks in terms of missiles. Okay, Russia is currently producing 200 Iskander missiles in production, 1,500 tanks, 3,000 armored vehicles projected in 2025. So we're just going to stop all that? No, that dog don't hunt. That thing is already gone. It's moving, and you're not stopping it unless you give them exactly what they want. And what they want an open field in front of them. They want 20% of what what they have, which is about 20%, and they want a piece that they don't have yet. And the Ukrainians said, are you nuts? Because these positions that they will hold will make it that much easier for them to go in later on. Will they do it? Will they not do it? Who knows? But the point right now, they're not stopping there. They in terms of their, how strong is Russia? Even though the U.S. dominate global exports, which is 43% of all major arms sales, Russia ranks third with just 7.8%. But in a key note in London last month, the NATO Secretary General reported a warning he had made public at least 3 times this year. The Western alliance is severely lagging behind Moscow on ammunition production. And they are in the process right now of ramping it up, but that's going to take not a month. It's going to take a couple of years before you get that right. Okay? Age 47 says, that's why I say Putin knows the game. He won't agree to peace. Of course not. He's not going to agree to peace. But the president wants the Nobel Peace Prize. He said, well, go and get it. You could have it. You could have it. I'm sure Putin says you could have it, but just make sure I get 25% of the country. I want an open field in front of me. I don't want a bunch of European soldiers looking at it. No, and definitely not you. And I guess you could fly some plane over, but nothing serious. So at the end of the day, and you could tell that this is exactly what's happening. And I could tell you why, because 5 hours ago, Donald Trump basically said it is very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking. Okay? And he's saying attacking, not just attacking, he's saying attacking the other country, attacking the invader's country. De facto, it doesn't mean fighting the enemy. Is fighting the enemy in his own. So he's basically inviting the Ukrainian to attack Ukraine, which is something historically they said, just keep fighting, but don't attack the Russian people. I mean, they have nothing to do with anything. That's going to increase it even more. So don't do that. And that's what he's saying. But what is a White House? And when I mean the White House, who's the White House? Well, you talk about the press secretary, but more importantly, you talk about J.D. Vance. You talk about his whole executive. They said what the president's social media post is an observation. I was talking in general. I wasn't talking about Russia here, right? How many LDA banks is saying, how many miles did Ukraine have when the United States made the agreement with Russia? How many miles? I'm not so sure what that means. Oh my God, age 47. Talk about Israel versus Palestine. And that's the other thing that I've been saying is, why is this war keeps on going? Because now all bets are off. Right? Because literally now we're gonna bring Israeli soldier. We're taking over Gaza. Why? Right? Well, I mean, you have to understand one thing that is driving, and this is against the public opinion, technically, frankly. What's driving Netanyahu is really the idea that he wants to keep fighting, because the moment he stops fighting, they're waiting for him. The courts are waiting for him. Now, did he do something? Did he not do something? We don't know exactly, but L Bank says, do United States originally made an agreement with Russia not to move a certain miles close to their Russian border, or how many miles did? Well, it was an agreement, an understanding that said, okay, you guys, it's okay for us to give weapon to Ukraine as long as they kind of push them back, but we're not going to give you the kind of weapon that you need that you could reach Moscow. Not to that extent. And because now that's a red line, because then you're saying, whoa, well, that changes everything now. If you're going to attack me in Moscow, then who knows what the next step is. And this is why when you get involved in these kind of war situations, you have to be careful what you say, because don't forget, the NATO general says that the Western alliance is severely lagging. There is no point of putting soldiers in the middle, because there's nothing you're not gonna protect anyone. Okay, it's not going to protect anyone. I will do a live on Israel and Palestine later on, because I need to understand more of the facts, but I kind of have an idea. And Rudy, basically, let me repeat again. NATO economy is 25 times bigger than Russia. It is $50 trillion. And the Russian economy is 2 trillion. 50 versus 2. But that 2 trillion is producing 4 times how much ammunition as the whole of NATO is producing. What do you think is producing that much? So that he's pressuring Ukraine. Now, this thing is going all the way. Now, all the way meaning, well, I'm holding my positions, or you give me a pretense to keep moving forward and forward and forward. Now, the European, unfortunately, have much larger economy, yes, but they're spending on socials. Don't forget that Russia right now is what you call a war economy. What does that mean? Well, 40% of the federal budget is tied to defense and security. Rolling this back without sparking unemployment and industrial collapse could take 5 to 10 years. That is the thing that you need to understand. The fact. Yeah, we know what the president said. But the fact alone that if you think that Russia could suddenly stop, it's just not possible. All these, you could have, if you tell these people, let's say we're done, then you're going to have unemployment. Why? Well, because all these soldiers are out there, right? And they're not doing anything. Remember, U.S. history. What is a cowboy? What are these? What happened after the War of Secession? When the war was over, what did these people do? These soldiers, they had nothing to do, so they start roaming the countryside and became cowboy, became bandit. Right? They had to make, and that's a concern. Without sparking unemployment, and industrial collapse could take 5 to 10 years. Military factories and supplies dominate the industrial output. 41% of the federal budget. Converting them to civilian is slow and costly. You can have labor shortages and demographics. With mobilization, brain drain, and an aging population. Russia lacks the workforce flexibility the U.S. had post-World War II. Sanctions limit access to Western capital and tech, making diversification slower. Basically, they have nothing else to do. That's what it means. It means they have nothing else to do but fight. And they need to keep fighting and moving. So you got this huge pressure right against Ukraine. And it's moving slowly, and it's getting stronger. And don't forget, I will tell you all the story because don't forget, Russia is getting closer and closer to China. If they get weaker, then they'll call on China. Maybe not openly, but less openly, but it could certainly happen. So you've got yourself a situation there, my friends. You got a situation where you may not be able to stop what's going on. Peopleolum Gray says, red lines are only in Putin's mind. NATO already owns Baltic Sea, the longer border of Ukraine and Finland. Now Finland is also a NATO member. Well, we didn't get there yet, right? The red lines are, NATO already owns the Baltic Sea, but NATO, as I said, is not in a position to fight Russia if something comes to shove. And of course, you can say that would never happen. Well, I mean, people in Russia are scared, and nobody will change inside. Yeah, soldiers are dying for another, same like in Afghanistan. Yeah, but the point is, it's a war economy. right? They're giving huge bonuses to these people to go and die. They're bringing people from North Korea. Now, for some reason, they pulled back. A lot of the North Korean soldiers somehow went back, are going back to Russia. That's an interesting, not sure exactly what's really going on. But basically, you're getting into a situation now where, frankly, something needs to happen and something needs to happen quickly. This is the reason why I want you to join this channel, because we are following many of those black swan. Like a black swan in this case would be, well, but the U.S. is not going to fight Russia, and Russia is not going to go all the way to Kiev, and Russia is not going to fight NATO. Well, no, but let's see. And this is where we have to keep analyzing and see the situation. But when you have Trump coming out and basically saying that he should go all the way to Russia with his weapons, but then you also see the White House is, hold on, that's not what he meant. That is not what he's saying. What you're hearing really is you're hearing the JD Vance of the world, the MAGA people behind saying, no, we're not. And if I know that, I'm sure Putin knows that. And he says, guys, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? This is over. And this is back to the point that I want to make, which I make the last time again, is one, okay, that Trump needs to give up his Nobel Peace Prize to keep Russia closer. You need to keep that relationship. You can't have it both ways. And telling Ukraine to strike means I'm out of the game, because you know very well they're not going to strike. You know very well that that's not what you mean. You know very well that you're never going to be allowed to sell those weapons. You sell those weapons to Russia so you could reach Moscow. I mean, a couple of months ago, he said, and you notice that he keeps saying, I am not giving, I'm selling. But still, the MAGA people are no fool. They say, yeah, but that keeps us involved. When you say you're selling, it's not that they're going to retail and give me 100 Tomahawk, right? Papaloon Gray seems to have something interesting to say. Let me say. He's basically a person who knows a lot of Freudian inside policy. I think somebody may do special green people in Baltic, like it was, this might even be the greatest. Yeah, well, right, because, what he's referring to is that sometimes, you're going to say, well, fine, give me the 25% of the country and I stop. And before you know it, you have the little green man running around and start inching. Why? Unfortunately, you have a war economy on your hands. You're not going to be able to stop. You got to keep these people busy. Unless you get a really, really good deal, exactly what you want, it's going to be very difficult to pull that thing back. You don't pull a war economy just like that. It takes a long time. So point number one, Russia essentially has said no to any troops on the ground in Ukraine. And the European last week they were saying, well, we could bring some people there, and then, the UK say, I'll be more than happy to bring some. But what soldiers? For what purpose? Right? You're not going to fight the Russian. You don't have the ability. NATO right now has no ability to fight the Russian. It's impossible. Okay, and they know it, and Russia knows it. Number two, Trump said, "Well, because I want my peace prize, let's fly over." That's not going to happen either, because that's not going to be enough. Because the Europeans says, "No, we don't want to fly over." Because remember what happened in 1994? You were supposed to get one guarantee, and we never got them. And we got them. But guess what happened? The Budapest Memorandum of 1994 was understood by Ukraine when they say security guarantees. And don't forget, the US, the UK, Russia signed this. Real security guarantees. The plane is not going to, what are you going to bomb? Who are you going to bomb from the sky? And that's Trump was saying, well, maybe we could do that and I still get my price. And the European says, no, that's not. But even if that was okay, the Russian killed that right away. Say, I don't want anyone there, no one. The picture behind me, that's what I want. I don't want to see anything around at all. I want to be the only one. And then when I decide to continue, if I decide to continue, then I will continue. And that's the price that basically, because there's subliminal messages happening, right? And where Trump is basically, Putin is basically telling to the president, listen, keep away from the Europeans. So that means I don't want to see them. I don't want to smell them. I don't want to hear them. Okay. And then maybe we could talk. Is the U.S. willing to do that? They have no choice unless you're going to get involved in a fight, which they can. When I say the U.S., right, you have to keep in mind there's elections coming up next year, and if the Republican wants to keep the House, they have to keep the MAGA people very, very happy. If they can't keep those people happy, they're going to lose it, right? And what does that mean, the MAGA? And the MAGA people are all about making America great again. Didn't say conquer the world. He says, let's keep the jobs, let's keep the people here, and we don't want to fight with anyone, and we don't care about what they're doing, and we're definitely not weapons for that purpose. Even selling them weapon, don't really like this idea. But obviously the president pushes. But I think now he realized he can't, so now he's threatening. Okay, but that threat, I mean, it's easy to tweet because don't forget, it's not like he's thinking on that day, on that very day. If you look at his Truth Social, in about 5 hours, he sent out one picture, one video, another video, something about the attorney general, and then another thing about political trials, and then another video, and then another picture, and then so in 6 hours he posted 6 things on this. So it's just coming out. It's just when you tell that it's very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. It's like a great team in sport that has a fantastic defense, but is not allowed to play offense. So you want the Ukrainian to play offense. That's what you're saying. You want them to attack. And the White House right away is saying, no, it is an observation. He doesn't mean what he says, which is probably not very good for the president. But they told him, listen, we got to shut you down because you can't go around saying that. Paplun, Gray. If Europe on the USA want to be ready and not lose, they must have to give ration and be ready. The harsh reality is that you've got a humongous army in front of you, and you're not going to be ready for a couple of years. And Putin knows that. And if he's going to take this thing, it has to happen right now because he sees all these elements. He sees the MAGA. He sees China, right? He's literally has the ability to turn his entire country as a war economy, which is not an easy thing to do. Imagine tomorrow we say we're going to spend 40% of the budget on. Let me double check how much. What percentage of the budget does U.S. use on defense? I mean, they have a big budget, obviously. Yeah, I mean, right now, it's about the U.S. spends about 13%. Imagine you were to spend 40%. So no more food stamps, no more of this, no more of that. We're going to start building weapons like crazy, right? That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. So these are that's the situation, and the situation is going to get a lot worse. Why? Why? Because he's not stopping. Because obviously, the more they talk, the more they argue, and the more they plan, he keeps advancing. And fine, I mean, he's sending troops, and you have to be careful with the news. Why he's not doing anything? It's not working. He's losing. The people are starving. Well, I don't know. He's got 20% so far, and it doesn't look like someone that's afraid of anything. And now, of course, you have lots of negative news coming out against the administration. This is ridiculous. Trump's roving banditry will undermine the U.S. economy. Lots of very, very negative. I mean, everybody is entitled for his or her own opinion. I'm not saying that, but it is unclear what Trump meant in his Truth Social post. White House press secretary said the president is making an observation, which happens to be true. Of course, she doesn't want to lose her job, so she's not going to contradict the president. I'm observing. He also posted 2 images, one of him pointing at Russian president and another former President Richard Nixon poking his finger into the chest of the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. At the end of the day, you need to remember one thing, because that has a huge implication for the U.S., and I'll tell you why. The reason is, if this thing goes, forget the Nobel Peace Prize, that's not happening. If the administration is not able to keep Russia away from China, which I don't think it's possible anymore because they already got plenty of agreements, they're doing war games over there and everything else, and they're next to each other. And then in your attempt to try to keep them away from each other, you get the US more involved, then you're going to lose your base. That's right. Now you could say you could fly the plane, but you don't want to do that. And that is a problem. Now, in the meantime, Putin has achieved his goal, which is basically to keep the U.S. away from the Europeans. I mean, they came over, they talked, but they can't agree on anything. And the Europeans know that, and they say, well, you wanna talk Turkey, then do something for us meaningful. We need some security guarantees. We don't want this flying over. We want something real while we're building our armies because we're really concerned about Putin. But unfortunately, you don't have the time. You've been doing socialize the entire Europe. And the U.S. on the same time, why is the U.S. trying to get so bad between Russia and China? Because it depends entirely on China for a lot of things. And there's another thing that's cooking in the background between the U.S. and China. They put like a 90-day reprieve to talk about they need to make a deal between China, but they can't. It's not happening. They're going back and forth, and China is not listening and is not agreeing to anything right now. It's complaining. In fact, they complain very heavily. In fact, they want to stop buying the chips from NVIDIA because Lutnick, the trade secretary, basically said that we're giving the Chinese the worst chips anyway. So, I say, really? Then we don't want it anymore. Where do you have to say that? So you're creating, it's an antagonistic relationship that's building up, and the Chinese are not sending any more weapons. The Chinese are not sending any weapon, the rare earth minerals, right? Palipoprun Gray is saying that basically EU is a great economic unity, but not political or military alliance. They can't build their own. That's right. EU, Peplon Bloom Gray is historically correct that the EU is a bunch of merchants. It's not a country. It doesn't have an army. Now they're trying to build it. But like I said in my previous live, it's going to take a while to build that army. Yeah, they're going to spend 5%, but that's not happening now. And Putin knows that. He says, this is the time to move. This is the time to have it. They can't build their own army. Well, you're right. They each building their own individual army, like the French army, the English army, whatever, but they can't build the whole thing. And that's going to be a problem because at some point they're going to need to be able to face their reckoning. And don't forget what the French president said right after he came back from the discussion, the meeting in Washington. He says, this Putin guy is an ogre. He wants to eat everything. Well, he knows. They've told him, listen, sir. I mean, they're not going to. The Russia is not about to stop and pull back its war economy. You need to understand what it means, right? With 41% of the federal budget versus 10% or 13% in the U.S., Russia tied to defense security, rolling this back is going to create unemployment, industrial collapse. Now, timeline-wise, we're talking short-term, 1 to 3 years, even after a ceasefire. Defense spending would likely stay elevated to maintain readiness. We're going to keep spending. And civilian recovery will be minimal, meaning people are not stop. You can't just stop fighting and go back to be a driver, a taxi, or a teacher. No, you got to keep fighting. Maybe 3 to 7 years, if the peace holds, fiscal rebalancing could slowly cut defense spending to 20 to 25%. But it would be on the way to change all the factories and all those things over again. This is going to be impossible. Not maybe 7 to 15 years. You could achieve a true diversification into civilian growth, right? Operator time. Leave the US out of it. Let Ukraine and Russia figure it out. That's exactly what the MAGA people have been saying. I said, what are you doing? You're getting involved in this thing. This guy is ready to fight. They, unfortunately, for whatever reason, gave him a reason to go in there. And the U.S., the U.S., frankly, who feels sorry about the whole thing is Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton actually said, in 1994, I was president, and maybe it wasn't such a good idea to force them to stop having, to remove their nuclear weapon. They're 1900. Did you think that if he had 1900, Putin would have invaded? And that's why you have to be careful when you get involved in other people's business and you say, do this, don't do that. But then, and so when Russia went in there in 2014, they said, whoa, I didn't mean I'm going to go in there and I'm not going to die for you. That's not what I meant. And this is how you get in those situations. Now, obviously, these situations can get very nasty very quickly. Why? Because now you are half pregnant. What are you going to do? How far are you going to go? When are you going to stop? And that's the issue. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel because let me tell you right now, we're following about 10 of those issues around the world. Now, this has a huge implication for the US. Why? It has a huge implication. Forget the stock market, which is overvalued to begin with. We cannot afford any real war now. That is not a good thing. I don't think it's going to happen, but be careful. Worst thing have happened, and more stupidly, right? The second thing is you need to understand that the U.S. needs to recoup its lost ground. Industrial. Now, having said that, industrial is only 20% of the economy, so it's not, it's just that that 20% is crucial because it's about medication. It's about, remember that the U.S. gets all of its antibiotics from China. How do we get there? How did Europe get there? Having no armies. How did they get there? Well, very slowly. It takes time. You just remember the story of the grasshopper and the ant, right? Well, the grasshopper is singing and dancing and having a good time. U.S. stays out of other countries' issues. That is what them mad at the U.S. now. Of course. Well, they thought the U.S. were going to get in there, but the U.S. is not in that position anymore. Yeah, you got to have lots of weapons, but you still need to build your own antibiotics. 100% of antibiotics in the U.S. come from China. Now, of course, they haven't said no antibiotics for you, no vitamin C for you. They haven't said that. But what they have said is let's take it easy on the rare earth mineral for a while because you could use it for weaponry, quite frankly, which you could put and then send it to Ukraine to bomb my friend Russia. So they are pulling back a little bit. Be careful because they pull all the way back. You could find yourself without medication tomorrow morning. And what would you be willing to do to get it back? Now, China is also aware that you don't want to poke that U.S. bear too much either, right? Because they know what the U.S. can do, and it could be damaging on both sides. So nobody wants that. So that's why they keep talking back and forth. But you cannot keep getting weaker and weaker and weaker over time, meaning that you're not able to build. It takes 10 to 12. It takes like 12 years to develop a rare earth mineral all over again. That's a long time. And right now, 80% of the market is with China, and China is very close to peace by strength. Unfortunately, Adrian is correct. Columbus, how are you? Right? You want to be able to do it, but you have to be careful what you want. Because what's going to happen is before you know it, you could find yourself in a very dire situation here. And obviously this email, this text from this tweet from president doesn't help things because it gives the impression of, so what is your point there? Well, the point he's trying to make, frankly, he sent like 7 tweets in like 5 hours. So maybe he was upset, maybe he didn't think about it, and that's why they pulled him back right away. And whenever that happens, you have to understand that they're concerned that this quest for this peace treaty is going to create another war. And guess what? Tomorrow the U.S. is going to allow Ukraine to have this long-range weapon that's going to hit Russia, Moscow. Maybe you should feel the pain more. How is Ukraine going to get that? You need the U.S. This tells me that the U.S. is on its way out in terms of this involvement, which is something that I said last week that eventually, the elections are coming up. We cannot be fighting this. He's going to be going, the president's going to be going to all these rallies, to bring up the base all over again. And you can have this thing hangling around that somehow the U.S. is going to get more involved in the war. That cannot be. So that's going to be a problem. Okay. And they want to be able to do it. Now, how long is that going to last? That's it. So, can Russia move beyond its war economy? Right. Unfortunately, and I don't think maybe it was planned way ahead, obviously, you don't. But Russia's economy has become heavily centered on wartime production with defense spending, industrial. You need to understand that point to understand what's really going on. Industrial subsidies, military focus, employment taking precedence. You want to make money? Go and work, go and join the army. Analysts say this system is becoming deeply entrenched and overextended. 41% of the government spending. Okay. The National Wealth Fund, once a fiscal buffer, has shrunk dramatically, with roughly 11 trillion rubles to under 3 trillion, raising serious concern about long-term fiscal stability. They have no choice; they keep going because now fiscally it is not responsible. What does that mean? Well, it means you can't. When you go to war, right? How do you make money? Well, you make money because you're building the weapon. Where'd you get the money to build the weapons, right? You can't print your own money. You got to get it from the out. So the way they're getting their money is they're basically going out and selling their oil. So that money comes out, right? The money comes in through the oil, and that's how they're able to do it. I mean, unlike the U.S., they cannot print their own currency. Exactly, $5,000. Wow. Even if so, the temporary GDP rebound driven by wartime spending and elevated energy prices is losing traction. While growth exceeded 4% in the first quarter, they are only at 1.4% annually. So fiscally, it might not be the most responsible thing to do because once you've got the weapon and you just send, what are you? How do you make money? Well, oil basically. That's what it is. The only thing that people want from Russia is oil. And what happened when that stopped? Well, that's what Trump tried to do, but it didn't work out. He tried to go to India to stop, but they said, no, I'm not going to. 30% of my oil comes from Russia. I'm not going to give that up. Are you nuts? That's never going to happen. So over-reliance on military production has chipped away at civilian sectors. Inflation is climbing. Labor shortages are worsening. Well, they're not doing so great. Well, don't worry about them too much because it's a war economy. So Russian economy is increasingly dependent on China, okay, and other Western partners to bypass sanction and source critical imports. You see when they say your Russia economy is increasingly dependent on China, that's what Trump tried to do when he was in Alaska to say, can we, you got to stay away from these guys for a while. But it is not working out. It is definitely not working out. So, what's the next step after this? Well, I think that basically the U.S. butts out of this whole thing, gets out, goes away, and stop getting involved. There's no other way. Let me see what you guys are saying. Russia doesn't have a lot of all national republic like. No, they have oil. That's all they have. Around 5,000 my city if you want to build a Shahid. Michelangelo, wow, what a name, says, I know how to end the war. Atheism is a logical fallacy, is religious creator. God, well, I don't know if God has anything to do with that. Unfortunately, I think, God has left that place a long time ago because this is a lot of war going on here. Just remember the 2000 Pipaloon Kure says, it was so peaceful that nobody wanted to increase the armies. That's right, no regular armies anymore, only after the Crimea crisis. Merkel, Sarkozy, to build army. That's right. When everything is great, you say, hey, you know what, the worst come to worst, the U.S. going to come to our help. So let's give money to everyone. Let's spend freely. Let's have a good time. Let's enjoy ourselves, right? What's the worst thing that can happen? Well, this is why this channel is about. This channel is about trying to see what's really going on because any kind of conflict like this, any kind of precipitation. Now, of course, a lot of people could ask, is this the right way of doing it? Do you really need to tweet something like that in the middle of a war because this is not really helping, and maybe you shouldn't do it? Okay. But Weird TX Deplorable Veteran says Trump is a treat. I don't know what he means by that. But be careful. But I will tell you, when I see the reply from the White House, I could see what they are thinking. Because don't forget, these people need a job. He doesn't need a job. Trump doesn't need a job ever, right? He doesn't need to be president, and he cannot be president ever. So he wants the Nobel Peace Prize. The thing is, when he wants something, he goes for it. He doesn't stop until he gets it. So that's a problem, because for you to get this Nobel Peace Prize, that means that the war has to stop between Ukraine and Russia. For that war to stop, the European, they want security guarantees, or at least the Ukrainian. You cannot give them security guarantees because that means you're gonna have to get involved. Papillon Gray says Russian region does not have a lot of oil. Really? Russia has no major nations there. Modern Russia is still an empire. Serbia has small nations. No, Russia has a lot of oil. In fact, they're selling it. What wars did Obama stop, says John Bishop? Well, there was a thing in Syria. Remember that? And he said to the Syrian people, to the Syrian army, okay, stop, and that's how Russia got involved in Syria, actually. He basically told them to stop, don't use any white phosphorus or chemical weapons. And they used it, and they went over the red line, and they didn't do anything. And that's when Russia said, oh, okay, interesting. So you guys are talking, but you're not acting. And that's when Russia got involved in Syria, quite frankly. And then remember what Biden said to Putin, don't, when he says he's going to go over, don't do it. He did it, and nothing happened. And now even the Europeans are saying, hey, come on, we're a bunch of lovers. We're not the fighters. Or, what do you mean you... Yeah, he's right there. He's right there with a war economy, and he's not going to stop. It would collapse on itself. It's like you're training a bunch of pit bulls, and then you want them to, be dog laps. That's not going to happen. You got to get new dogs, and now you got to get rid of those dogs. How are you going to get rid of the dogs? You got to get a new one, buy a new one. It's extremely complicated, the situation they're in right now. And the concern for us, right, in the U.S., for example, for the world, it's a big problem, right? Because if you're European, okay, how do we stop this guy? Well, you created a monster. And now he created his own monster by creating a war economy. And I mean, it's one thing to poke at India by saying 50% tariffs. And remember, wars have been started. Take a look at my video, my live on that, and I'll make a shorter version, more compact. But wars have been started because of trades. World War II, the Japanese, right? Why did they do what they did? Well, the U.S. had a blockade around Japan, and they had to get out, and that's what they did, Pearl Harbor. And there's many instances like that. Now, is this happening like that? No, but when you tell India 50% tariffs, you're basically saying we're not buying anything from you. It's not starting yet. I think it's starting August next week. But this is federation like the U.S. People, blue and gray say, but they are a national republics where there are lands and lots of oil and rare mineral. Check North Asian people. Too many diamonds come from there. Yes. I mean, it'd be great to get the rare earth mineral from Russia, right? Or Ukraine. Because you don't have to depend, because you're not getting it from Russia. Or you're not getting the same amount of rare earth mineral. And this is a big topic. By how much has the amount of rare earth minerals from China has come down, has dropped? I think it's you're not getting what you used to get. That's for sure. There was a huge drop in April. In April, China rare earth export fell by 37%, while the export of rare magnets dropped by 58%. You need the magnets for the missiles, by the way. In May, the decline intensified. The rare earth magnet export plunged 74%. Now, this is not medicine yet. The steepest fall since 2012. So they could close the spigot. They're closing the spigot. Export of rare earth magnets for the U.S. specifically tumbled an astonishing 93% year over year as of May. So, people learn about Obama. Yes, correct. U.S. access to rare earth mineral from China has plunged dramatically. In May, by 93, especially for rare earth magnets, essential to high-tech and defense industry. What do you think is happening? I mean, it's there. You have to read the sign. The signs are there. April saw a sharp contraction, but May, 93% drop in magnets. So you don't sell it to us anymore. We give you money for it. You don't want the money. Why not? Why don't you want to sell us a rare earth mineral? Well, because you could put it into the magnet you could use for weapons. Why? You think I'm going to use my weapons? Okay, and that's this is how this thing starts, right? War can be started. Now, what happens if tomorrow China says, well, no earth mineral, no medicine? What else do they import? I mean, the U.S. is highly dependent on China. I want to let you know, in case you know, China relies on the U.S. for its consumer. But the U.S. relies on China for 50% of its circuit board. 80% of lithium batteries come from China. 80% of pharmaceutical ingredient, 100% of antibiotics. You're going to say, how do we get to that level? Well, it takes time. The same way how did the Europeans get to a point where they can't protect themselves anymore? Rare earth minerals, 70% to 80% supply. Now, the Europeans right now are thinking, well, you know what? We have the atomic bomb. The French have the atomic bomb, thanks to de Gaulle. Okay. They're getting, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with the atomic bomb? You're going to bomb them? Are you sure? Maybe you could just get taken over, because if you drop the bombs and he's going to drop the bomb, then what are you going to do? So this idea of the bomb is only is to prevent, right, someone from invading you, but can you actually use it, right? And he's got a war economy, and he's getting closer. And the French president says he's a no-go. So all these things are piling up, and people are just going around with the stock market, with their lives. Be aware what's happening. Be aware what's going on. Rare earth, 80% U.S. supplies. You're not getting your rare earth anymore. Why? But because, I think what happens is the U.S. elected Trump too soon, because the guy is going around doing all these things and say, whoa, what do you mean? What do you mean 50%? What do you mean 30%? What do you mean you're going after India? Right? What about Iran? Roman Rogers says no one is nuking Iran. No, because, well, we don't know what they have, what they don't have. Piblo Boone Gray says, remember a time when made in China stuff was the worst brand with awful quality. And I read an article about the models in China's Navy. It was funny, but now, you're totally right on that. Believe it, right now, there was an article about the fact that the biotech industry is having its DeepSeek moment. Now, DeepSeek, remember, right now, everyone is using ChatGPT because it's from the US, and it's doing great. But DeepSeek is catching up quickly, and they realize, you know what, you could have DeepSeek for much cheaper, and it's done and 59% of Asia is using DeepSeek, by the way. So they realize that now the biotech industry in China is catching up. Now, this is not T-shirts anymore. This is not cheap stuff. This is biotech. The Chinese biotechs are discovering more molecules than the US. Compare the Chinese, I want you to be informed, biotech versus US. I believe that they're doing quite well. Here's the thing. No, we're not talking t-shirts, sneakers. We're talking advanced stuff, right? In 2024, China represented only about 4.8% of the global biotech market, while the US has 35% and Europe is 31. So basically the smart people, right? However, the biotech is expanding rapidly. From 74 billion in 2023 to 263 by 2030, growing at a strong 8, 9, 20% CAGR, which means a compound annual growth rate, which is for those that are interested, it's an average. It's a geometric average. Okay, so globally, the biotech sector was valued as 1.5 trillion and expected to double to 3.8. China, here we go. China now contributes roughly 23% of drug candidates in the global pipeline, trailing the US by 48% still, but it's rising fast. Right? A quick regulatory environment gives Chinese startups a pace advantage. Drugs may move to clinical trials in 18 months or less. According to Bloomberg, Chinese biotech rapid and cost efficiency pipeline development is dramatically reshaping the global drug innovation. So China is more than just what you thought that it was. The sky, David Campbell says the Skynet is coming, judgment day is upon us. Well, I mean, I don't know about that, Mr. Terminator, but it's all piling up, right? All over. The signs are there. Don't say, well, what happened? Well, let's not panic. The U.S. is still number one for now. But, between 2012 and 2022, top cited biotech publications from Chinese institutions grew from 139 to 671. So basically, these are peer-reviewed articles from scientists where they say, well, I've discovered something called, this vaccine or whatever, and they write it down and they share with scientists, and this is how you come up with, this how they came up with the RNA thing with COVID. An increase of 382%. In contrast, the U.S. saw a 34% decline of papers. University professors or research scientists are doing less, and China is like this. The U.S. is still here, and China is here, but they're doing this. What do you think happens eventually? SS. China is thinking about the future, and we have morons who are trying to take this country back to the past. When you do everything to go back, this is I know. Yeah. Let me see. It's time for a poll. Is the U.S. is China more advanced than the U.S.? Let's see what your thoughts are on that. But I think, hopefully, well, I don't want to. No. This is serious. Strategic partnerships. Wow, 60%, 67%. This is serious. 71% of you think China is ahead. Now, of course, if you know that, you could bet that the people working with the presidents know that as well, and they're telling him, you got to do something. 75%. Well, I'm doing something. I'm doing tariffing everyone. He said, well, but the tariff, you're upsetting the children a little bit with those tariffs, and then you're pissing off lots of countries. I'm going to do a live soon on Canada next week, who's turning to some of the Nordic countries to do away with 75% of you are thinking that China is more advanced than the U.S. That is not good. At least the word is spreading. U.S. leadership faces headwinds. There's regulatory sluggishness. That's what Trump was trying to remove them. Declining federal research support. Shrinking NIH. Still, the U.S. maintains strong advantage in AI-powered biotech with substantial federal R&D. I mean, the U.S. is not done, but the signs are there. And unless something happens very quickly, which cannot happen very quickly, well, the administration is trying to make it happen quickly. And how are they doing that? Well, they're doing it because they're doing it with the what's going on with the U.S. is doing it with the tariffs. But Paul Romagno, how much was advanced and stolen from the U.S.? A lot. Watt says, "See, their letters B2 looks like ours." Yeah, how much of that advancement was stolen from the U.S.? Yeah, I mean nothing is yeah, no, but nothing is fair in love and war, right? And that's what they've been doing. They've been going at it, and right now, yeah, 64% of you thinks that yeah, it's not happening. That's a problem. It's a big problem. And they have several issues that we're following for you here. We're going to talk the economy. Well, you've seen what happened to the stock market recently, so be careful. That thing cannot take too much shaking. Let's put it this way. Still okay, but cannot take too much shaking. And now, and I think and I think it's getting shut off with this administration. Well, I don't know if it's getting shut off. It's just that you need I guess you could raise, you could issue more debt to pay, so you could. Well, what is the U.S. is doing, for example, besides the tariffs now, they realize that's not gonna work as fast as they thought. They want money to come in from overseas, and that's what they're doing. They're asking for all that money coming from Asia and China. I mean, not China, from Taiwan and Europe and all that, and Japan. But they did something interesting with Intel, where they're taking a stake in a company. So because Intel obviously is semiconductors, has been losing ground for years to the Chinese and Taiwan, and you need semiconductors to do everything. So what they've done is they're trying to do it. So they're starting to take a stake. They took a stake in Intel. What's wrong with that? Well, what happens is the money Intel was supposed to get $100 billion from Biden through the CHIPS Act. And they say, well, you know that $100 billion that we're giving you for free, now we want equity for it. And say, oh my God, the U.S. is getting involved in, well, we want to make sure you're spending the money correctly. So now trying to hold on to, well, let's not get carried. Maybe it's just a thing. But let's see what they do with it eventually. Are they going to keep doing it? Are they going to keep taking advantage and taking over companies and managing the companies? How do you get, I mean, obviously you're in a hurry, but how fast you're going to go. So essentially, what do we have? We have Trump saying that it is very hard, if not impossible, to win a war. Now, of course, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's also a picture, right? Right after that, there's a picture of Donald Trump pointing to Putin with his finger and touching his chest. Then, right underneath, there's a picture of Nixon pointing to Khrushchev. Is that a warning? Is that what you're doing here? And then he says, it is very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. That's almost a threat to the Russian. It is like a great team sport. This is the kind of stuff that MAGA hates, right? Because that means, what are you doing? You're poking the bear. You're poking the Russian bear, really? Well, what does that mean? What is the point of the U.S. getting involved in this war? Well, they're going to invade Europe. Well, they're not going to come here, right? So, and we've seen what happened with Iraq, Afghanistan, even Korea, quite frankly, and even what happened with Vietnam. The last good time that you could show was World War II, when the U.S. actually did something. Apart from that, it's been and now you're going to get involved in this? Just get out. Just move in and do business with the European. And, if it comes to an obvious, invasion of Europe, then you get involved. But apart from that, this is frustration more than anything else, unfortunately. And that's the reason why the administration mainly was just talking. He doesn't mean anything by it. What does it mean? He doesn't know what he's talking about? Is he useless? He forgot what? No, he's just talking. Well, don't talk like that because it's upsetting the children. So basically, Trump wants one thing. He wants to keep Russia away from China. I don't think that's working too well. Russia wants to keep the European away from from the U.S. That's not working too well either, because quite frankly, they had a big meeting, a big one. You see the meeting? It went in, they had a meeting, another meeting. They were all hugging each other, giving them letters, and everybody was. It's not working out. Well, it's not working out because Russia is here, China is here, India. They are already together. In fact, they created this thing called BRICS. So anyway, we shall see what happens next. I got a couple of very interesting comments coming up, and I will share them with you. Anybody else has any parting comments? Anything I need to know, need to hear that should be of interest? Don't forget to join the channel.